Yatavarivaha pura paripurenti sakaram. Ready? Ready to go? Different chant. What is the first line again? Yoso. Yoso Bhagava Sama Sambuddho Vijja Bhagavata Dhammo Supatipanno Yasa Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Dhammayang Bhagavantam Sadhammang Sasangang Imehi Sakare Hiyatavahang Aropite Hiyabhipujayama Sadhuno Bhante Bhagava Suchira Pariniputopi Pachima Janata Nukampamanasa Ime Sakare Dugata Panakala Bhute Patikan Hatu Amhakam Dikharatang Hitaya Sukhaya Alahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Abhivademi Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijacharana Sampanno Sugato Lokavidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati Sata Deva Manu Sanang Buddha Bhagava Dhammahang Bhagavantang Abhipujayami
Tamahang Bhagavantang Sirasa Namami. Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanayiko Pachatang Veditabo Vinyuhi Tamahang Dhamma Abhipujayami Tamahang Dhamma Sirasa Namami. Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Ujjupatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Yaya Patipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sami Chipatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Yadidang Chattari Purisa Yugani Atta Purisa Pugala Esa Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Dakineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anutarang Punya Ketang Lokasa Tamahang Sanghang Abhipujayami Tamahang Sanghang Sirasa Namami. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, not busy with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be happy, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be happy. Let none deceive another. cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, freed from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to false views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Excellent. I've got some questions today. Are the questions many? Oh boy. That's nice. 1 minute each. Okay, excellent, great, okay. Here we go. First question. Dear Ajahn, thank you very much for your teaching. Good. Sorry? No, I did have some more, but we said only take 1 minute. Thank you very much for your teaching. When I follow your guided meditation through YouTube, I discover that When I follow your guided meditation through YouTube, I discover that I poo more. May I know what's happening here? Yeah, you're letting go. No, sometimes you're relaxing more. So sometimes we need to obviously relax, and sometimes we're so tight inside ourselves that sometimes that we don't know how to just relax and let everything just go naturally. Sometimes you're not trying to increase your, what can I call it, your productivity on the toilet. It's just, you're trying to just to relax so everything in your body goes smoothly without any problems. I think that's all. I don't think there's anything. You cannot say that an enlightened being, I can't say things like that, I'll get into big trouble. Yeah, so it's just natural. Your body is acting in its usual way. Dear Ajahn, what is Buddhism's views on the origin of human and other living beings if there is no God? The origin of beings, we're not talking about the origin of things, like stuff. I know that when it comes to the origin of material things, that, okay, you're going to get me going now, with science, there's one thing, instead of saying the origin, what about the dissolution when things end? And something which I always recognized was a basic law of science and a basic law of life. Things can't be created or destroyed. Like even matter, stuff. It can either just get converted into energy sometimes, or from energy converted into matter, into stuff. But the sum total of mass and energy can never be increased or decreased. So, what happens at the end of the universe? And sometimes I remember doing a conference, a talk between religion and science, and different people's ideas of the origin and the end of the universe. So what if all the matter, all the stuff, all you guys, every being and every sort of star system in the huge universe, what if it all came together? If it all came together, like, the idea of it like a black hole, if it all came together, what would happen to it? Would there be so much energy in there that it would just kind of explode? Or what happens if the total sum of mass and energy in the universe balanced was a zero-sum game? Remember when I mentioned that to our local head of science here in Western Australia, he turned around to me and he looked at me like the term they have, gobsmacked. He said, "You're so up to date, Ajahn Brahm. Omega equals 1. And that was a little scientific term. The value of mass and energy. If all the mass and energy came together, it would totally balance out. I mean, the whole universe. All the people, all the things, all the energy. There is something which we do call negative energy, and I'm not talking about emotional stuff. I'm talking about real negative energy. If you have something which is heavy, so this bowl or something, I'm not going to lift up this maybe. This is a couple of kilograms, and if I want to take this out of the Earth's gravitational field, it's going to take some energy to do that. So the sum total of energy of this 2-kilogram bottle of water is much more. It's actually much less than 2 kilograms. If I take it out of the gravitational field, it has to lose some energy. It has a negative energy component. And as most things exist in some sort of field, it means everything has a negative energy component. And if we take it away from everything balances out to zero. Nothing created, nothing destroyed. That's how things can come out of nothing. And they can go back to nothing. And that is modern science. They don't need to be created by a thing, by a being. Do you understand? You don't? I didn't think so. So, of course, that can happen. And if there was, a creator being, they always have the question, what was there before the creator being? Who created a creator? And that's always a question which can never be answered. And that's one of the reasons why I really, as a scientist, I love the idea of Buddhism. When nothing is created, like a willed act by something else, it happens because it can happen. That's actually what happens in science. That's what happens when... Is there any theoretical physicists here like me? No? It's like even Hawkins, black holes. Later on in his life, he realized actually black holes aren't totally black. They decay. When it's not supposed to happen at first, in his first theories. But because they can, it means they will. Getting anywhere? Yeah. Or even like, I love physics because it makes your brain actually see things which shouldn't be true, but they are. And because it's not because we're going against laws of science, it's because we didn't understand those laws of science to begin with. There's this one gentleman, he was the first Welsh person to get a Nobel Prize in physics over in Cambridge. And he got his Nobel Prize in physics for what is called quantum tunneling. And he got his big breakthrough when he had been meditating, and he came out of his meditation, and all the things which he'd been working on, he saw the solution. After meditating, his mind was so clear, he could see the answers, published his theories, was totally rejected for about 11 or 12 years, because there was another gentleman in the United States who had 2 Nobel Prizes, and said, this Welshman was wrong. But then he stood his ground, and then after a while, people were fascinated by how he can stand his ground when he was arguing with someone who had 2 Nobel Prizes. And then people did experiments and proved this Welshman was right. And so quantum tunneling is like you have a certain amount of energy and you've got to climb over a mountain. There's no way you have enough energy to get over that mountain. How can you ever get over that mountain, get to the other side, when you haven't not got enough energy anywhere to be able to climb over the mountain and get to the other side? And the solution was like quantum tunneling. You cannot exist in the middle of the tunnel, but you can exist on the other side. So it will happen that you do actually, because of the quantum theory, quantum mechanics, which is not really a theory, but it's true, you can travel through that mountain and get to the other side. You may have heard quantum tunneling before. It's true, it works. And that gave rise to some form of supercomputers, which work. And that meant that he got his Nobel Prize. I kind of took notice for 2 reasons. One, because he got his final breakthrough through meditation. And number 2 was, because he had to battle, other people for about 6 or 7 years before he convinced others, yes, it is true. He was a rebel, and a meditating rebel. But it was true, and he got a big prize for that. Makes any sense? Okay, more people are nodding now, so that's a bit of a breakthrough. But I'll go to the next question. Thank you very much for your teaching. What can we do to thank for the plants and animals that sacrifice their lives to sustain ours? What can we do to thank for the plants and animals that sacrifice their lives to sustain ours? Is first of all try to use less, no matter what you ever make use of. Try to make sure you're as harmless as possible, and then try to make sure that your life at the expense of others, like your lives at the expense of your fathers and mothers who sacrifice so much for you, are actually worthwhile, that they become happy with you. You're doing something wonderful in this world. You're not just using more plants and animals and other sort of the resources of the world. See if you can make some good use of this. And what's the best use you can make of the plant life and animal life and other stuff in this world? It's always for kindness. To be kind to one another, to be forgiving. It doesn't matter sort of whose leader does what. That's the leaders, and you all know what it's like, that we don't really have that much choice of what our leaders do. Sometimes we are like pawns in a game, like little ants in a big ant's nest. And we are some of the worker ants. So we try to make as much harmony as possible with other species of ants, no matter what country they come from. So basically, no wars. I do remember this one story. Because of my age, many of the young people, which I remember going to the United States as a teenager, and I remember seeing many of those young people were being sent to Vietnam to fight in a war. And I knew that many of them never ever wanted to go. But I also remember a story, one of the first times that a journalist actually was allowed to, actually I don't know if he was really allowed, he went into one of the operations of the US Army in Vietnam, and he uncovered a great atrocity from the US troops. It was the slaughter of everybody in the village of My Lai in Vietnam, the My Lai massacre. And for some reason, I still remember the name of the commander, Lieutenant Calley. Lieutenant Calley was told by his bosses to tell his troops to murder every man, woman and child in that village, without exception. And most of the soldiers went in there with their M16s, the big machine guns, and that's what they did. There was a couple of soldiers refused to go in. They were refusing an order when the army were at war. And one of them was this African-American soldier. And I know this because they did a documentary, I think it was 25 years after the My Lai massacre. And somebody told me about it. They gave an honest description to me about what happened. That of all the soldiers they could trace, every one of them had huge, who was actually still living, had huge emotional and psychological problems. They couldn't have a relationship, they didn't have a job, they didn't have any resources, they were living in care homes and stuff. But the one which really stood out was this African-American soldier who was basically happy, well balanced. You look at him and think he's having, a successful life. And he was one of the ones who actually refused to go in. And he was interviewed apparently and asked, why did you refuse to follow that order? And he said, are you religious? He said, no, I'm not religious. I only joined the army as a way to escape the ghetto and as a way to escape and get some sort of life. But I wasn't religious at all. Well, when you were asked to go in and kill every man, woman and child in that village like the others were doing, why did you refuse? He said, because it was wrong. Simple answer like that. He trusted his conscience. Did you not realize what would happen to you? He said, yes, I realized. I'd be put in military jail for about 4 or 5 years. And those military jails are far worse than civilian jails. And you were willing to endure that? He said, yes. That's much better than living with the memory of having killed innocent men, women and children. And then they said to him, and how do you feel now? I feel at peace with myself. I'm happy, well adjusted. And apparently he was one of the only ones who were. So 25 years after that massacre. And of course we don't watch TV, so I think that's an accurate description of the movie which was done. Sometimes even Buddhism, any religion, please let your feelings, your heart tell you what is the right thing to do. And if you follow your heart rather than the words of religions, that will always protect you and will be the best way to follow, because there are some things even in life. Right now, for example, in many countries of the world, they always will discuss many things like LGBTQIA+. These are people who have gender non-specific understandings of their life. And even now, many people who are Buddhists, they ask me, I've just found out that my son has told me he's gay. What should I do? My goodness, what do you mean, what should you do? Love him to bits, that's what you should do. Doesn't even Buddhism actually teach us this, to have loving kindness to all sentient beings? And this is your son, maybe your daughter. Listen, hear, and love. Be kind, no matter who they are. And that's one of the problems which, as a senior monk, or the senior monk here, I often have to face. Not really a problem, but an opportunity. When for sometimes some people who are not just a normal male, not a normal female, if they really want to live monastic life, can they? If not, why not? I remember one of the first men who came to see me, he wanted to ordain. He was well known as a gay, and he wasn't just a gay, a hidden gay, but he was practicing homosexual. And he said he wanted to now be a monk. Could he? In Thailand at that time, it was illegal. I was already in enough trouble with the conservative monks in Thailand. But then it wasn't about being in trouble, about reputations. This was a human being, he was a really good man. And I remember asking him, I said, "You want to become a monk?" He said, "Yes." What happened? What would happen? This is the question I asked him. Please forgive me for being frank. I said, what would happen if a young man came into the monastery and you really thought he was adorable? What would you do? He said, I'd just go back into my hut and meditate until I was over that. That's how much he wanted to be a monk. And I trusted him, and he became a great monk. And I've given ordination to many people who I don't think many other teachers would give ordination to. And I'm very proud of that. He became a very, very good monk. Do you know who he is? Mahatera now. Who was he? How many of you have been to Melbourne? To SOS? That's Ajahn Nisarana. And he's really well behaved. He hasn't done anything which is any way you could actually find fault with. And I thank him for that because he taught me, give people a chance. And then there's sometimes other people I always was warned against, don't ordain anybody who's a clinical schizophrenic. It's very difficult to deal with people who have clinical schizophrenia. This one young man wanted to ordain, and he gave him a chance, and he ticked all the boxes. And all the monks who knew him, we all agreed that he well deserved being a monk. And he survived as a monk so well. I'm incredibly proud of him. And he's living over, you know who he is? You don't. That's amazing, because I'm sure many of you have been over to Kusala Vihara, where Ajahn Santuti lives, and his second monk, J.R. I'm really proud of him, because there's no way in the world that he's supposed to have survived as a monk. But he survived so well, and he's done such a great job. And the reason why he survived and why he's such a good monk, he's got really good mindfulness and care. He's found a nice niche for himself in that monastery. And he supports that monastery, and as a monk, works. But Ajahn Santuti, knows him so well. He knows himself, his mindfulness is good enough. If he needs a bit of a rest because his medication is not balanced or something, then he does so. And everyone who visits there don't realize, that that's a person who, that sometimes I thought, is this going to work? give it a chance. And it always does. One of the other things which is happening now is voluntary euthanasia. In other words, you have a grandfather or grandmother, and they're suffering, they're real suffering. Like some of the old people I visited in hospitals and hospices, and they said this to me. I remember this one fellow who was old, had lung cancer, basically could hardly breathe and could not sleep at night. And he asked me, he said, Ajahn Brahm, can you please take me out the back and shoot me? That's how much, he was feeling this great pain, and there's no solution possible. Have you had those discussions in places like Indonesia and Hong Kong about if a person has got no quality of life and their death is unstoppable, that only doctors would say, look, they're going to die soon anyway, and they decide to choose the time of their death by having the voluntary euthanasia. Have you had those discussions before? And some of those discussions, I don't know, because I've seen that so many times. And you say you're not supposed to ask a person or suggest a person to have voluntary euthanasia. But sometimes the question comes up, what's a Buddhist idea of that? At least I knew when I was studying the monks' rules to say that it is against your precepts to kill another person or kill another being. But if it's what you choose yourself, technically the way it's put, the way it's actually described by the Buddha, no, it's not against the rules. I remember having this argument with a Sri Lankan professor. He was well known as an expert in Pali over in Sri Lanka. He came over to the West and he started teaching. He was very well known in Sri Lanka. And I remember when I was talking with him, I respected him so much because he actually listened, even though I was junior. He listened and listened and listened. And then afterwards in his talks, whenever I would go and see him, he would say, oh, this is the Western monk who taught me Pali. I didn't teach you Pali. He said, you taught me an important part of the Pali, not to assume, but to actually to look and see. And he said, I was right on that. And he would never let me forget that. That's how humble he was, but how important that was for me to understand. You can ask questions, and difficult questions, and good monks would be honest enough to admit they were wrong, even though it was a controversial issue. All of these types of people, they encouraged me for years to follow my heart. This is what I asked first of all, a very difficult question, and I usually just meditate with it. I can't see anything wrong with it. And a lot of time then I go back into the Pali and look at it again and again and again. And you see, it is right. That's the correct interpretation of even what the Buddha said. Voluntary euthanasia is not where you decide on another person's life. They make their decision. It has to be without any encouragement either way. They make the decision. They have to be in full control of their faculties. They make their decision and they make their choice. And if they decide to push the button to end their life, and it is really like that. The doctors, the carers, they set up the equipment. So eventually all it is a little button you press on the computer screen. If you press that, then you go to stage 2, press that, stage 3, press that, stage 4. Many times you're asked, are you sure you know what you're doing? It's checked all the way through. Now it becomes a voluntary euthanasia. And I know people who have witnessed that. And the reason I mentioned that was because one of the monks already mentioned his father, at the end of his life, there was no possibility of his condition getting any better at all. And so eventually the doctor, he asked, can I qualify for voluntary euthanasia? And the doctors totally agreed. He was in full control of his senses, but he was going downhill very fast. And so this monk was also present. He said it was one of the most beautiful experiences, with his mother and his father pressing those buttons, all the family around, totally legal. He said a beautiful way for a person to die and for him to witness that. That's what he said. I wasn't there. I've got no right to comment. But I thought that was a fascinating experience which he told. When you get very sick towards the end of your life, and there's no possibility of a cure, and it's real suffering, sort of suffering which I've seen in hospices with people I've known for years, what would you want to do? It's not your decision, but it's their decision. Let's make it even clearer for you. How many of you have a cat or a dog at home? Okay. What happens when your cat or your dog gets very sick? You take it to the vet, and the vet said, look, your cat, your dog, your pet you've loved very much is going to die soon. There's no possibility of cure. Can I give it an injection to put it out of its suffering? What do? As a Buddhist, it's very hard for you. You're always told you've got to be kind to other animals, and that's your cat, your dog. You've got to be kind, but then again, you don't want to kill it, and it is your choice, you think. So it causes a dilemma for Buddhists who have pets. Unfortunately, there is a really good answer to that conundrum, and that is, if you have, say, a cat who's got some really bad cancer, and the vet says, I have to put it down, please say, please give me a minute or two with my cat. Take it into a quiet room, put it in your lap, and then ask it, do you want to die? Have you had enough pain? Ask that question and see what answer you feel. You're sensitive enough to know the answer to those questions. That's a being you've lived with for so many years. And then follow what the cat says. One of our vice presidents of our BSWA many years ago was Judy. Don't mind mentioning her name. But I know she was a really good Buddhist. She was the one who, she wanted to go and see the Dalai Lama once. She was traveling in the north of India. Who knows? She put her name down as the vice president of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia. And they thought that was a really big organization, so they gave her priority, so she could actually go and see the Dalai Lama. And most people, no way. But anyhow, while she was waiting, about 3 or 4 days before she could actually see the Dalai Lama, she did her meditation in the meditation hall. And she told me that on one morning she went to sit down, she was getting quite peaceful in her meditation, and somebody came to sit next to her. And of course, she wasn't that peaceful, she just wanted to have a look, see who it was. And that was the end of her meditation. It was Richard Gere. She was a woman, this was many years ago. Richard Gere, no matter, watch the breath. I'm watching Richard. Breathing in, Richard, breathing out, Gere. Richard Gere. She got really sort of distracted there. But she also was the one with her dog. Went to see the vet, and the vet said, look, there's nothing more I can do. Your dog is suffering. It's in great pain. There's no possibility of the condition getting better. I'm a vet. I know what I'm talking about. Can I please give the injection to put the dog out of your misery? I said, out of your misery? I think out of its misery, what the vet said. But you don't put the dog out of its misery. You put it out of your misery. You don't like to see it suffering so much. And then she followed my advice. She took the dog to a little corner, held the dog, looked into its eyes. Are you ready to go yet? And she got the very clear message back, no, from the dog. I mean, not words, but the feelings, no. So she went back to the vet, just in the next room, and told the vet, no, I'm not going to allow you to euthanize my dog. And that's when the vet is very, very well educated. I know you're a Buddhist, but that's not a kind thing to do. I thought you were compassionate, you Buddhist, you stupid Buddhist. I never want to see a Buddhist again. You're hurting that dog. And so she took the dog home. And 6 months later, she brought the dog in for another consultation. The dog had made a full recovery. The vet looked at it, wow, you Buddhists are so smart. You're so kind. How on earth did you know that? I just asked my dog. He knew what to do. And I always tell that story. If you have a dog or a cat, or any other animal you look after, like a husband. No, I shouldn't say that, should I? Maybe they're getting sick. Ask them what they want. Somehow they know much more than anybody else. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I remember just many times people who, you've been treating, got really bad cancers, they're dying. And then, I remember this one lady, she called up and said, can you come and see me now? And I'm really busy. I'm always busy. But they said, look, I'm going to die in 24 hours. When they say things like that, is that what your doctor said? No, not him. She knew herself. People can understand their body, be mindful enough to know that the body's on its way out. So I went to see her. It was true, that night she died. This is amazing, this is the experience of a monk over so many years, caring for so many people, and seeing just how this life and death work. And just how, especially if it's animals, just ask them, hold them in your hand, in your lap, depending on how big they are, and then look in their eyes, and trust what you feel. And that's often in moral dilemmas. That's what I tend to do these days. And I always find it's almost exactly what the Buddha would have expected. You're following the truths. That makes sense to you? Hopefully, because that's helped me so many times. And these difficult decisions you can't avoid. You have to find a solution to them. Anyway, lots of plants and animals that sacrifice their lives to sustain ours. Do they really sacrifice their lives? Do they choose, please come and eat me? Is it? But sometimes, their lives are sacrificed. Their lives are taken. And there's no way we can stop that totally at the moment. But please, see if you can lessen the harm and hurt. And you make use of, their sacrifice of even like grass and trees. Make sure you make use of that in a wise way, not just to make footballs out of pigs who get slaughtered. Footballs, people play football. Seems to be a total just disrespect, using things just for sports games. Anyway, I better keep going on here. I'm spending so much time on this, but it's a very good question, thank you. And I hope I tried to answer it as honestly as I can with some other examples. About karma, you mentioned in past lives, somehow we have connections with Buddhism. Yeah, so we are not newbies, correct. Does that mean all the relationships we have in this lifetime, all the people we met are all from past lives? Not all but many. So we meet no new friends in this lifetime. You do also meet some new ones, but you also meet some old ones as well. If it's that, sounds a bit boring. This is, many people these days use this therapy called hypnotherapy to remember their past lives and to solve very severe emotional problems. An example of that is this friend who's a hypnotist here who told me of in one of the conferences they went to on hypnotherapy over in Sydney, that one of his friends was actually doing some treatment to this young girl, only 16, who was anorexic. I should put in this little silly story first of all, before I go back to the real story. You know what anorexia is? I remember just looking it up in the dictionary to check, because I've been a monk for such a long time. Some of these words which you know so well, you've read in newspapers or seen on TV, you don't watch TV, so I don't know. So I looked it up in a dictionary, anorexia, and the definition I saw was you look in a mirror and you think you're fat. And I thought, wow, that's who I am. So I know that's my condition. But anyway, this is more serious, this real story. She was 16-year-old, anorexic, and nothing was helping her at all. And she was getting sicker and sicker and in danger of dying at a young age. And so her mother was so desperate to find a solution to her daughter's problems, as you would be if you were a mum. And so they took her to a hypnotherapist. And the idea is you try and bring a person into their past lives to see if that has anything to do with how they're reacting to difficulties in this life. And because she was young, 16, in Australia the laws are very strict because there's been a lot of abuse, by doctors and religious people as well, to make sure that everyone is safe. So if she was only 16, her mother had to be in attendance during the hypnotherapy session. And it was good that her mother was there, because what happened was really strange. As she was getting hypnotized, she remembered her previous life. In her previous life, she recalled she was the youngest of two sisters. And those two sisters in their previous life fell in love with the same man. And the younger sister really loved that man so much, but her elder sister also loved him. And he chose the older sister, who was more beautiful, more attractive, went out with her and then married her. And the younger sister was so heartbroken that she committed suicide. And as she was telling this with all the details, the mother, sitting in a chair just observing, was going crazy, crying and weeping and bawling. And this poor hypnotherapist didn't know what to do. He was getting to the heart of the problem with the 16-year-old, but the mother was just really going crazy. So he took the the young girl out of hypnosis, tried to sort of calm her down, and then started to counsel the mum. So what's wrong? She's safe over there. Look, you can see her. Nothing wrong with her, except she just remembered an early part of, a part of her previous life, and it may be the reason why. She is being anorexic. And the mother said, it is the reason. I was that sister. When I was young, the mother said, I had a sister. We both fell in love with the same guy. My husband, her father. And she was so upset that she committed suicide. We've never told her about that. We don't want to tell her, the tragedy, before she was born. We've kept it a secret. And the way she says everything, that was so true. She was my sister in the previous life. Now she's my daughter. You can see just how complex life is. She couldn't be this guy's husband. The sister got to him first. But at least she could get reborn as his daughter. And she was trying so hard to be attractive, because not being as attracted as her older sister, now her mum, made her kill herself, suicide. And so because of that, she was overreacting to trying to be beautiful, and that's why she was anorexic. The truth can be sort of painful to face. It's only through that remembering of the past lives they could get to that truth. And that's how life works. Understand? There's another gentleman. This fellow who used to do, the friend I was saying, who used to do hypnotherapy here in Perth. There used to be, many of you know him too, Dennis Shepherd. He was our president of our Buddhist Society many years ago. He's gone a bit old now, so he doesn't really do this much anymore. There's one of our common friends, he was a Scottish man, and he was a Buddhist, and he told us that when he was young, he knew how to fly an aircraft. The ones with propellers, not the jet engines. He just knew. He had never been trained, never gone to some college to learn how to fly aircraft. It was just a natural ability he had, even when he was young. And he said that's something which always bothered him. How comes he knows how to fly an aircraft when he's no training? And so he decided one day to try and solve that solution by being regressed into a previous life. And that's what he did. And because he trusted me, he let me listen to the recording. And when I listened to the recording, of course the solution is obvious, that he was an Air Force pilot, RAF, during the Second World War. And even though he was Scottish in this life, in his previous life he was in Wales, where he joined the RAF. And he was the captain of one of these flights, which wasn't going on any bombing mission or anything. It was just transporting things from Wales to Gibraltar. And Gibraltar wasn't under fire from the enemy aircraft. It was just a new aircraft he was flying, which had a faulty rudder in the back. And the faulty rudder would be perfect as it was taking off, as it was cruising. It was only when it started to land the rudder went out of control. And it crashed in Gibraltar. And when he said that, I thought, I know enough about my history to say, if that was the case, that should be easy to find. I went into on the internet, air crashes in Gibraltar. There's only about one or two, and found it straight away. And that was fascinating for me to find it on the internet, simply because it was easy to find, and it matched almost exactly what he said under the hypnosis. Of course, I let him know, he was fascinating too, that what he recalled was true. And if any of you ever do that, you have memories of a previous life, what you think are memories. You get sort of either hypnotherapy, which passes many of those blockages which you put up so you don't want to remember the past. Or through meditation is even more accurate. It's amazing what you find. It answers a lot of the problems. Basically why you are who you are. Does that make sense to you? Anyway, there's so many stories there, but should I tell one more one?
Yes.
Okay, forget about these questions. That was another one of our presidents of our Buddhist Society of Western Australia. It says, these are Westerners, and they sometimes get attracted, to this philosophy. And this gentleman, that he was in the Australian Navy, an officer in the Navy. He's had a nice little life for himself. But then, because the Australian Navy rarely go to war, so it's a safe life, but you get all the perks of being an officer. Always got someone serving you. And he had a brother who was having some psychological problems. And of course you look after, the people you love, people in the same family. So he heard, he started coming to our monastery and temple. And when he came to the temple, he heard that our president at the time was, Dennis Shepherd his name was, the president, was doing hypnotherapy. And so, he's interested because apparently if you believe in rebirth or not, past lives or not, still if you recall something, it has an emotional effect on you, and it does actually cure many of the problems which other people can't even get close to curing. So, but he thought, instead of just asking my brother to go and see this fellow, he's going to try it himself first. So he made an appointment, this naval officer, and it just so happened that this naval officer was called into emergency duties. They were doing a training in case there was a terrorist attack on the Australian Navy base on Garden Island, just 30 kilometers to the west of here in the Indian Ocean. And so he said, he was on call for about 3 days, and hardly sleeping, and doing all these exercises, trying to make the training as realistic as possible. And so when the training finished, he had maybe just a very short time to rest, and then go for hypnotherapy to see if it worked. And he said he puts the fact down to that he was exhausted, that when he went to that hypnotherapy, he got memories of his previous life so easy, and it's all recorded, and it all turned out to be true. He was born in Ireland, of a very poor family, during the time of the potato blight, and that's where the Irish really learned how to hate the British, because the British would not help out at all when people were starving and many people died. These are your mum and dad and your brothers and sisters. And nevertheless, he realized there was very little possibility of a good life, so he volunteered, to serve the Brits by coming over to Australia as a volunteer prison officer. You serve for 3 or 4 years, and after serving for 3 or 4 years, you got a grant of a parcel of land in the somewhere in Western Australia. He couldn't choose where, so that's what he did, out of desperation. He remembers the uniform he wore, a special uniform, and he managed to go to the library here in Perth, Beatty Library, and found photos of that. And that was my uniform. He also remembers seeing the red coats, that's the old British soldier's uniform, and the historians say, no, they never came here. But then he got a couple of photographs from the library. They were here, he was right. He remembered what his name was, and saw that in the list of people serving in the prisons. He remembered where he met his wife in a pub in Fremantle. This was maybe 100 years ago. And he got the record. He didn't find the record of the church where they got married. He could not find that, but he had so much other information. He found out, the block of land which he asked for after serving, and he was free to settle. And he found that in the south of Western Australia. And later on, as an interest, he went with Dennis, just the two of them, to go and see if that piece of land was still there. Had the records, in the land office, and his name was on those records as a person who was first granted that land. The name he remembered he was in a previous life. And he went down there with Dennis. And Dennis and him are just really nice people. They're not kind of hippies or crazy people at all. They look, really upstanding, nice people. So they called the farmer, and the farmer said, of course you can come and have a look. And then when they came in, and the naval officer said, can I see my house? What are you talking about? I built the stone house. And then the farmer said, yeah, it's just over here, just the remains of it. And that's when the naval officer said, no, it's not. I built the house on top of the hill up there. And that's when the farmer wanted to get rid of them straight away, because it was correct. And that was a heritage building, one of the first stone houses which were built in that part of Australia. And it was illegal to destroy it. That's why the farmer wanted them off the property immediately. But they were such nice people, and they said, look, there's no way we're going to tell anybody about that. It's such a long time ago, previous life. But it was true. And he also remembers where he was buried. He knows where his gravestone is. And because he went into the records, and they told him where someone of that name was buried at exactly the time he said. He went to live in Albany, in a house down there, an old house. That's the southern city of Perth. Everything checks out. Then afterwards, I remember we had a meeting with, as many monks were interested actually in this hall. And he was telling us all about this. He said it answers a lot of problems about, why he was in the military, but still a devout Buddhist. He was such a devout Buddhist, he said as soon as he realized those memories were true, he had to give up drinking alcohol. He was a naval officer, they get all this stuff for free, most of it. But then he said, after I realized that, no more could I break the 5 precepts. I have to keep them. And that's part of it which I really thought fascinating. Once you see the bigger picture, the incentive to do 8 precepts is huge, or 5 precepts is huge. So that was him, and just how he could tell us, and of course I respect him to the max. That's actually what happened. So I love these stories of people who remember their past lives. And if one person does, why not everybody? But I do know that if you do remember past lives as a kid, it causes so much problems for you. Can I go to my real home, Mummy? My real mummy is not you, it's that mummy over there. You know, it just causes huge difficulties. And also, it does mean that, who was it? There was one book written by Stevenson, 12 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. We've got copies of that here. It's a well-known book. This was again a psychiatrist, was it a professor of psychiatry, Ian Stevenson, and he mentioned these 12 cases which are just so suggestive, almost you might say proof of rebirth. And I remember meeting one of those kids over in Chiswick in London, because I was giving a talk on rebirth. I was a monk at this time, and this was my local area. I was staying with my mum in Acton, just north of Chiswick. And when I was giving that talk, afterwards this young man came up and said, I'm one of those cases in those 12 cases suggestive of rebirth. And he said it was the worst thing I ever did, was allow my story to be published. He had a terrible time at school. You know, all his friends found out at school that he was claimed to be reborn and lived before. And they teased him terribly. You can understand that that's what happens. And that's why so many people, they may remember a previous life, but they won't say. You get tortured, prodded and poked, try to prove that you're wrong, even though you are right. So anyway, it's over 9 o'clock now. There's still so many questions here. Are you all right with this so far? You are? Okay. Now I'll tell you a personal story. It's not what you're thinking. I'm not telling you of my past lives. But I said no one in my family was a Buddhist. They never really realized or understood like Eastern culture. But I do remember that my auntie, she died recently in January, age 99. Almost made it to 100, but not quite. And when she was only for the last 6 months, one of my cousins told me that she was really healthy all her life, and she was living alone in her house until about 6 months before she died. A 98-year-old living alone, but people would come and support her. And the last year of her life, she lived in an old people's home close to her son, so he could look after her. And she said she was happy in that home. She didn't need too much assistance. But one morning, she walked to the dining room for breakfast. She sat on a chair, and as my brother put it, he just stopped breathing. That's how she died. No pain, no symptoms. Just sitting there and just stopped. And the interesting part of my auntie's life story, because she was the cousin of my mum, my own mother was a single child of her parents, and she was a single child of her parents. Both parents were sisters. So they grew up as daughters. And basically, just, my mother never had any other brother or sister to relate to. And this person, my auntie Opal, her name was, she had no other brothers and sisters to relate to, so they really grew up as sisters. And so they told me that one day after the Second World War had finished, they were both going out, just for fun, young women, basically looking for husbands. And that's what women had to do. So they were going to a dance that evening, and so they first of all went to one of these mediums. It must have been a very good medium, because they didn't have much money, but anyway, the medium looked at my Auntie Opal, my mum's, I call her sister because that's how they related together, and said, "You're going to meet the love of your life soon." It's a nice, easy thing to say. But the love of your life, his name, first name Donald, D-O-N-A-L-D. That was a common name in UK at that time. Surname Wolfreys, W-O-L-F-R-E-Y-S. That's really uncommon. I've only known only one other person by that name, and that was this young man who introduced himself and asked my Auntie Opal, "Do you want to dance?" "Yeah," he would look nice. "What's your name?" "Opal." "What's your name?" "Donald." "Donald what?" "Donald Wolfreys." And I interrogated both my mum, who was there watching, and also my auntie for years. Did that actually happen? "Oh yeah." Imagine that happened to you. You went to see a medium and they told you, "You're going to soon meet the love of your life." And you just dismiss it, it's impossible. Okay, what do you guys know? And then this person introduced themselves by that name. You've never seen them before. How would you feel? Freddie, you're not married, are you? It's okay, you're not going to meet the love of your life on this retreat, so you're safe. But imagine they said that. And then somebody introduces them, and they're nice, and you go and speak to them, and that's their name. Because that's part of my family history, I know that's really weird. What's going on there? There's some amazingly strong karma. I know, I should have said, they were married for 60 years. It's a long time to be married. 60 years, and then he died, and then she died a few years later. Is it right to be talking about these things on a retreat? Okay, I'll do one question, hopefully it's an easy one, and then we'll finish off. It's only 9:10. Can you give some more hint in let go difference with give up? Oh yes. We can give up a lot of excuses of doing or not doing in the name of letting go. Letting go is a part of kindness, compassion. And that's how you can tell the difference. If it is not of just giving up in the sense of not doing duties, not being kind, that's not letting go at all. Letting go is part of kindness. As I mentioned, I think in the last talk which I gave on this, the kindness of opening the door of your heart unconditionally. Whatever comes in, whatever goes out, it's an unconditional love. Opening the door of your heart to something. That means there are some things. I have opened the door of my heart to each one of you many, many times. I'm not giving up on you. You can actually feel the difference there. Giving you freedom or just ignoring you. Which one do I do? That's what you do. Just like the love, like a mother loves her only child, and actually give her life for her child, as we chant. And you've seen that happen, I've seen that happen. It's not even mothers for children. It's like friends, people who are benevolent and compassionate. They will always go those extra mile for you. That's the kindness, that's what letting go means. And it comes to the point where you have, say a little cat, and and the vet said it's really sick, and you say, well, let me spend a few moments with my cat. You love the cat so much. You look in its eyes, and the cat tells you, no, it's time for me to go. And you let it go. You never give up on it. One of the cats which we had here, which I had a very special relationship with, his name was Kit Kat. Okay, not a very good name. But it was really part of our community. It was born in a log in Bodhinyana Monastery. And the only time it's ever been, or twice it's been out of the monastery, the first time was when we knew that cats in Australia, especially out in the outside of the metropolitan area, they had to be what I call monasticized, neutered, so they wouldn't have any babies. Because if they had babies, the population of cats will be so strong it will kill much of the wildlife, including the birds. So it was neutered, and that was only in Byford, just north of here. But then it still was catching so many birds, so many, that we had a meeting, and the other monks told me, look, it can't stay in Bodhinyana Monastery. There's no way that we can protect the local wildlife. And what about putting a bell around its neck? And I replied, there is one bell we can put around its neck which will stop it eating the birds, and that's a big bell opposite the main hall in Bodhinyana Monastery, weighs a ton. All the other bells you put on the little cats just make them more mindful. They move so amazingly slowly and we might say slickly, that they don't ring the bell. They become even better predators. So I said the only thing we can do is to send it to a nice home. And that was kind of a traumatic day for me, because it's basically my cat, and I had to catch it. It was easy to catch, it trusted me so much, and put it in a bag. And this lovely lady had a nice home to the north of Perth, and she was going to look after it for us. So we put it in the bag and put it in her car in the back seat where your feet go, so we couldn't see through the windows. We didn't want it to be able to remember its way home to Bodhinyana Monastery in Serpentine. So she took it home, and then in the bag, she didn't open the bag yet until it was in the house, and then let it out in the house. She was a very, very kind lady. So she really tried to look after that cat, make sure it was well fed. And then eventually she had to let it out into the garden after about 3 or 4 days in her house. And when it was let out into the garden, the cat made a bolt for ran as fast as it could for the garden gate, went out the gate and started running down the road. It was a Saturday during the summertime, very, very hot. She tried to chase it, but the cat was so fast. And then she called me. I was on duty at Nollamara that weekend. She called me, Ajahn Brahm, I'm really sorry to say this, but your cat ran away a couple of hours ago. I've been looking all over the suburbs for it, can't find it anywhere. I won't say what my response was, but where do you think that cat went? Where? Sorry? You know the story, don't you?
Yes.
You know how far it is? Was it a couple of days ago? You were on the bus going to Dhammaloka. Oh, you went to Dhammasara first, didn't you? And then from Dhammasara to Dhammaloka, and then from Dhammaloka to here. It's a long way to here. That was a smart cat. He didn't want to run all the way from this place which was like north of Dhammaloka, all the way to Serpentine. That would take a couple of days. So no, it didn't do that. It went from this place on the ocean side, and the place, what was the place called again? Waterman's. And from there, I answered this lady who was really upset and embarrassed and felt so guilty that she'd lost my cat. I said, "It's here with me right now." "No way!" They said about 5 minutes earlier, outside by the closed door of Dhammaloka, I heard a meowing sound. And I opened it. I couldn't believe it myself. This cat had found me within 2 hours. It's about 7 or 8 kilometers straight. And it was over a freeway, over many traffic. It had never been in Dhammaloka, or never been in that part of Perth, in any part of Perth before in its life. And I know that. And it found me within 2 hours. And the poor little cat, its feet were so hot. It was such a warm, sunny day. It had been running all that time. So as soon as I recognized it, I put it on a nice cushion, bathed its feet, bathed the cat's feet. The senior monk does that, and gave it some milk to drink. Saucer after saucer, about 8, 9, 10 saucers of milk. And at that time I was the second monk here. We had Ajahn was here as well. He's a senior monk. And she peed all over Ajahn cushion. That milk had to come out some way. But after that, little Kit Kat had a home. The home was Bodhinyana Monastery. We can't keep it away. And it died here. And it's buried under the Bodhi tree behind the Dhamma hall. You go to the Dhamma hall, outside of the back door, you go up the stairs and there's a Bodhi tree there, and that's where Kit Kat is buried. She deserved her place in our monastery. Am I a softy monk? It is kind, and of course. Nicholas, you were here most of that time. Is what I said true? Oh yeah. Were you here then, so involved as you are now? I know Amanda's was also one of Kit Kat's favourites.
I remember letting Kit Kat into the Dhamma.
Right. Oh yeah. A lot of times she had special privileges. Kit Kat. Okay, now I can keep on going forever on this one, but anyway I shouldn't. So that's what let go means. We never give up. Do you understand the difference? Hopefully. So anyway, we should finish off now. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Meow, meow. Oh my goodness, how many questions did I answer today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are how many questions I didn't answer. So, can I ask you for tomorrow, please don't write any more questions unless they really are necessary. So I'll try and do these questions and finish them, or at least some of them anyway. And if you do have any objections, I'm not answering the questions quickly enough. I'm sorry, but I thought these were all important answers. Am I right in that?
Yes.
Happy? Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so good night, everybody. You do not have to wait for me to go out.